Let me say a special good morning to those of you listening to Classic Radio 105.5, 105.9 on the FM dial. Those of you who are viewing us via GBN TV, whether it's Channel 7, Channel 11, Channel 20. Good morning. Welcome. I'm your host, GT, here on To The Point. It's Wednesday, the 11th day of December 2024. And on Wednesdays, we usually entertain various departments within government. And today we do have representing Senator Claudette Joseph will be representing this morning. And we're going to go over to her and say good morning. Let's say good morning to Senator Claudette Joseph. Good morning. How are you this morning?
Good morning, JT. I'm fine. And how are you?
Doing pretty well.
Okay.
Should I actually say that? I think something.
All of the GBN loyal viewers and listeners to the Point program. Good to be back.
Well, nice to have you back, and you're certainly welcome. Our conversation this morning will of course be part of the presentation that you gave to the International Court of Justice about the legal obligation of the state in respect to climate change. We're going to have a bit of a discussion on that this morning as we start. Tell us about the presentation as we kick this conversation off this morning. Tell us a wee bit about your presentation at the of course recently held climate that obligation of the legal state of respect to climate change. Tell us a little bit about that, about your presentation.
Yes. Thank you again. So on 29th March 2023, that was 29th March of last year, the UN General Assembly adopted a resolution by consensus of member states referring a matter to the International Court of Justice. As we know, this is the highest court in the world, and it is the court connected with the United Nations that help to resolve international cross-border disputes between and among states. So the UN General Assembly, in Resolution 77-276, referred some questions for consideration by the court and for the court to render an advisory opinion, which will operate or serve as a legal guide to states in how they treat each other. And the questions posed to the states, to the ICJ, that's the International Court of Justice, had to do with the legal obligations of states in relation to climate change, and particularly the obligations of states who contribute significantly to climate change or the impacts of global warming and so on, to other less developed states which, based on the geographic location and economic circumstances, do not contribute the same way or in the same measure to climate change. So, and basically the consequences. So the obligations of states to each other in relation to climate change and the consequences. And so we had well over 100 countries and organizations participating in the hearings. In fact, the hearings are still ongoing because the countries are taken in alphabetical order to make their arguments. And so relevant organizations as well are also making, submissions before the court. So Grenada presented last Thursday, and we focused on how climate change has impacted Grenada. And of course, we have the very recent occurrences of Hurricane Beryl and the flash floods. And we made a case for climate justice and stated that the states that contribute disproportionately, the major emitters of greenhouse gases, they must pay for their wrongful acts to the environment that disproportionately impact those countries such as us, mainly small island developing states, who do not contribute to greenhouse gas emissions. In fact, in Grenada's case, we are 0.01%, right? And so, I mean, that's all the historic records show, going back to the 1970s when there was a commencement of measuring these greenhouse gas emissions. So Grenada is negligible, and so are all small island developing states in terms of contribution to the emissions that cause global warming and the adverse impacts of climate change. So we say larger states must be made to compensate, give reparations, and also technical assistance to smaller developing states who bear the brunt of the climate crisis that the world faces.
Okay.
So I must say to the Grenadian people that Grenada, we were in the region the leaders in terms of preparing for this matter, so that we hosted a workshop last February, a right shop, for all of the Caribbean states, because most of us had never appeared before the International Court of Justice before. And that workshop helped to prepare states from the Caribbean for the case in terms of learning the procedures of the International Court of Justice, how to prepare written submissions to be filed in the court, learning the timelines, because courts always have timelines for filing documents or doing what has to be done, failing with sometimes the consequences that you are not allowed to appear or to file the document. So that workshop was aimed at preparing all the lawyers from all the different states in making sure we follow the correct procedure before the court, and that we were well prepared for the arguments.
Okay.
So in that regard, Grenada led the Caribbean. And then there was a second follow-up one last month in Barbados. But the Caribbean islands, we worked together, those of us who participated. And St. Lucia went just yesterday. St. Lucia had their submissions.
All right.
And St. Vincent goes later this week.
Let me ask you this Senator Joseph, let me also ask you this. What is the importance of Grenada being able to partake, of course, in terms of making the presentation that you did? What's the importance of it for Grenada, if I may ask that particular question?
It was of significant importance, because in order for states who are the culprits of climate change to act, we need very, very strong voices out there. And as a small island state, Grenada has taken its place at the table. If you, I don't know if the viewers are aware, most people should be aware by now, that our Prime Minister is at this point recognized as one of the leading climate change figures. He was listed in the Time 100 global leaders on climate change, and he was flagged for his hands-on and pragmatic approach to treating with disasters when they strike Grenada. He's very much admired for his hands-on and direct and practical approach to dealing with the aftermath of Hurricane Beryl, and also his voice, the contributions he makes when he goes out there. So too is our Minister for Climate Resilience, Honorable Karine James. In fact, it was Minister James who first told me about this case that is before the ICJ and suggested that we should participate. And she, with her ministry, organized the right shop that took place that helped Caribbean countries, including Grenada, to prepare for the case. So I would give her full commendation on ensuring that we were at the table, our voice was heard, and I would say that based on the reaction we've had from our presentation before the court, we were impactful we started the presentation with a 2-minute video narrated by the Prime Minister. And I could tell you that really resonated well with the court, both in terms of the content, in terms of what he had to say, and the images, the videographic images that formed part of the video. I don't know if GBN has it, but you should have it. And I would invite GBN to take some time to actually play the recording of our presentation before the court, because it's only 30 minutes. Each country has only 30 minutes, and they put a clock in front of you and they watch the clock run down. So you have to be very disciplined in your presentation. And sometimes, perhaps if you look at our presentation, you would see at times myself and Dr. Justin Sobian, who was the other lawyer presenting for Grenada, you would see us speeding up at times. That's because the clock was running down on us.
All right.
But we got our points across, and in part of the court proceedings, we had opportunity to file written arguments. So a lot of our the deep legal arguments were filed in writing in May, and then again we filed, I think it was October, we filed a second set of submissions. So we took full advantage of the procedure of the court so that we can get our full case across.
Okay.
So the oral submissions you would see on the video was just part of it.
All right. You spoke a lot about the legal obligation of this particular, of course, being part of this presentation, the legal obligation. How is Grenada tends to benefit from being part of this? How is Grenada tends to benefit from it in terms of the legal obligations?
No. Right. So part of what we argued before the court is that the main emitters of greenhouse gases, the bigger nations who produce fossil fuels, they should be made to pay compensation, reparations, offer technical support, and also there is a Green Climate Fund that was initiated under the Paris Agreement, where countries were to, the main contributors of climate change were to make donations, or not donations, make payments, because it's not a donation, it's compensation. They have to make payments into this fund, and by now, the fund should have been in excess of $1 billion. It is just under 700 million. So we argued for upscaling of the fund, for more contributions, or for states to be made to pay more contributions to the fund. They also have obligations under the other obligations under the Paris Agreement that a lot of the states are not honoring. So when the court renders its opinion, I believe based on the arguments that we heard, the court will render, I believe so, that the court will render an opinion favorable to small island developing states. It will put added pressure. The obligation would be made clear now, and there will be no defense in the case of further litigation between states. There will be no defense for the larger states who must meet their obligations. So it will put pressure on them to meet their obligations to support small island developing states in the fight against climate change. So it puts us in a better stead, and it would make us put us in a better place so that we can access support out there, whether it's by compensation from the Climate Fund or technical support. It helps us, puts us in a better position to make our respective cases for support.
I would say our small impact in comparison to the bigger countries. How are we speaking out will contribute towards change? If you look at the bigger picture, how are we speaking out as small islands? How will we speak out in that particular manner? How will it contribute to change in terms of climate change?
Well, we are speaking out in the various ways, including participating in this. This was a global case in which, as I said, over 100 countries and international organizations participating. And so this is as big as a stage as you can get in speaking out. And as I also indicated earlier, for Karine James, her voice is out there. She was just elected president of one of, I can't remember the name now, but one of the international organizations relating to climate change. Prime Minister is well and truly noticed, and his voice is heard. And as is evidenced by him being on the Times 100 global leaders in climate change. So, how are we speaking out? I would say we're speaking out very loudly and very clearly and are making valid points, which is why we are now noticed on the global stage. And that gives more clout, so to speak, to Grenada on its own behalf and on behalf of other small island developing states. Mind you, the other Caribbean islands are speaking out as well. Prime Minister Gaston Brown came in person and made a presentation, made a statement. He was part of his team before the court. The Attorney General of Dominica was there as well. So we have the Attorney General of the Bahamas. So as a region, we are heard, we are speaking out.
All right. Senator Joseph, we drew for a break. Let's take that break. When we come back, we continue the conversation, folks. It's To The Point, Classic Radio, GBN TV. We'll be right back after the break, folks. Stay with us.
Since it's night.
Tourism is me. Tourism is you. Tourism is everybody, and tourism connects us all.
Did you know that tourism generates revenue and foreign exchange earnings?
Did you know it stimulates infrastructural development and facilitates cultural exchange among people?
You must know tourism is linked to all industries,
from agriculture to construction.
So support the industry today and be welcoming to all our visitors.
Tourism is my business. Tourism is your business. Tourism is our business. Listen, one and all. Tourism connects us all.
A message from the Ministry of Tourism
and the Grenada Tourism Authority.
Looking to take your business to new heights? Advertise with GBN on our social media platforms and get noticed by our 138,000 plus followers. Reach a massive engaged audience ready to connect with your brand. No matter your business size, GBN is here to help you grow. Contact us today at admin@gbn.gd or WhatsApp 407-8458 to get started.
Welcome back, listeners. Welcome back, viewers, to The Point here, Classic Radio, GBN TV. Folks, we have with us this morning Senator Claudette Joseph. And our conversation, of course, in this first segment would lead around Grenadians being part of the presentation before the International Court of Justice on the legal obligations of the state in respect to climate change. Senator Joseph, welcome back once again. Good morning to you once again, and welcome back.
Thank you.
My question and that's an idea that comes to mind. Now that we have the most of the Caribbean islands being part of the presentation, and we, of course, in a couple of months we will be hearing, of course, if there is any result of being part of the presentation. Where do we go from here? Where does the Caribbean go from here in terms of that? In terms of you spoke of the legal obligations and so forth. Where do we go from here from being part of this particular presentation?
Okay. What we do is that we continue to make our voices heard in the right ourselves and of course each other in all of the right spaces, so that whatever programs, policies, resources that are allocated globally to mitigate climate change, we get our fair share. At the same time, I will say we also need to do in our own spaces as much as we can to mitigate on the impacts of climate change. So we have to take care of our environment. We have to protect our coral reefs, for example. Little things like making sure we don't litter, that's all part of taking care of the environment. Making sure that when we build sustainably, so that those aspects of climate change over which we have no control, because we have no control over extreme weather events, we have no control over hurricanes, droughts, floodings, those kind of events, we have no control over that, and those are exacerbated by the actions of the larger countries that emit greenhouse gases. But what we can do is to build sustainably. So we build back better, so to speak. After a hurricane, we make sure we build more hurricane-resistant structures. We make sure we take steps to mitigate against flooding in our flood-prone areas by how we build, what protective measures we put in place. We make sure we do all of these things. But we also, in doing these things, we need to have the resources, and that's why we are saying that the bigger states must contribute, because to do all of these things that I'm talking about, right? Building more resiliently, protecting against floods, relying more on renewable energy, all of these things are expensive, they cost money. And so that is why small island states need resources provided by the states that commit the acts that cause global warming, so that we can help ourselves. We have done a lot. Participating in the CRIFT insurance policy was a really commendable step, because we see the benefit of the payout from Beryl. As I said, building resiliently and all of these things. But one of the things we argued in the case is that we have an obligation. Those of us who occupy the planet now, we only hold the planet in trust for generations that will follow us. We are just basically borrowing space now. And so we have an obligation as trustees of the planet to take steps to ensure that we leave it in a better position than we inherited it. And fighting climate change is one of those ways that we will do that. Because if we don't, we will definitely leave the planet far worse off than we inherited it. Under the Paris Agreement, there's a commitment by states to work to ensure that global temperatures do not rise above 1.5 degrees of pre-industrial levels. And so far, the science suggests that we are not on target to achieve that. We are not on course to achieve that target. And so we need to be advocated strongly, because this is not something that countries such as ours have control over. I keep reiterating that. Some aspects of our environment, yes, we can control, but other aspects we cannot control, right? Greenhouse gas emissions cause our oceans to be warmer. That helps to kill our coral reefs and helps to cause more intense hurricanes. That is why we see Beryl being the strongest Category 5 hurricane ever recorded in the Atlantic season this early. Right? Prior to that, there wasn't strong hurricanes this early in the season. Beryl broke the record. And we would keep breaking records if we don't turn around the way we do things globally. And that's why, as small island states, we have to keep advocating. I don't want to get into some of the intricate legal arguments that we presented, written and oral, to our viewers, but I think they get the picture. So we made legal and evidential. Grenada, we gave strong evidential submissions to show how climate change has adversely impacted us, our economy, our way of life, our schools, everything, different aspects of our economy. So we were very strong in that regard. And we were unique in the point that we took in relation to us holding the planet as trustees for future generations.
Okay, great. Now, my next question that I want to ask that come to mind, of course, government plans. Climate change is important. What is government plans in terms of the continuing education for our citizens, in terms of having that different mindset towards climate change? I know there are still a lot of us as citizens here in Grenada that take climate change as a joke, if you understand where I'm coming from. Some folks have the belief, some folks don't have the belief in climate change, or if it's even real. Some have that particular mindset. What is government plans to continue to educate us as citizens about climate change? I know you're not the direct minister. I know you're not the direct minister in relation to that, but I'm sure there's been some conversations within, of course, the administration as relates to that.
Yeah, well, the thing about it, the news is that the science is there, the science is clear. Climate change is real, it is happening, and it is impacting nations unequally. Those nations contributing most to it are suffering the least from it, while all states are feeling its impact. Those states contributing the most are suffering the least, and those states like ours contributing are suffering the most. Our Ministry of Climate Resilience, I know they have been working to bring more public awareness on climate change. There is a Project Pristine program that's going on now in Caracou, which is aimed at cleaning up not just the land, but the seas of the vessels that were sunken by Hurricane Beryl, and that is getting a lot of public relations. People are aware of it. There's a lot of cleanup drive. I know they participate with the Solid Waste Management Authority and other environmentally conscious organizations. There was a big one last weekend where tons of plastic bottles and so were collected. There's a lot of that happening, a lot of awareness with the ministry in collaboration with the Solid Waste Management Authority and friendly, like-minded organizations. So I know there's a lot happening in relation to that. And our young people as well are getting involved. I know in the schools they have programs where the children are made aware and conscious of climate change and its impact and the need to keep our environment clean and safe.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for sharing information in terms of relation to, of course, the being part of that, being part of the International Court of Justice and the legal obligation of state to respect to climate change. Let's switch the conversation a wee bit, Senator Joseph. I want to talk a wee bit about pension reform. Where are we at now with pension reform?
I am pleased to say to the nation, we are quite advanced. We have completed the draft, the new pension bill that will be soon tabled in the Parliament. From my office point of view, that is the Office of the Attorney General, responsible for making sure that the law is drafted and finalized. We have done that. And I know the Department of Public Administration, PS Lindona, Hilaire Marshall, has been, with her team, engaging in quite some consultations on the bill, on the pension plan. I know they've engaged with virtually all of the stakeholders, including having quite a few public consultations. So they have met with the unions, the relevant unions. They have met with the employees who will be affected, and as a public workers who will be affected. They have met with other employer representative associations like the Grenada Employers Federation, the Grenada Chamber of Industry and Commerce. They have met with the statutory bodies. And so I know there's been a lot of consultations on the new pension plan. So we are ready to go, and we will shortly see a new scheme coming into effect for people who are not covered by the existing pension law. I just want to make that clear. So, we have the existing Pension Act, and the payment of pension was a hot and burning issue for years. In fact, the payment of pension was in abeyance for 40 years, since 1983, when the Pensions Disqualification Act came into force on April 4th, 1983. The court made the ruling, and the whole country is aware of the ruling that came down in March 2022, where the court, for the third time, right? We like to hail that judgment as historic and landmark, yes. But it was in fact the third time our courts said that the Pensions Disqualification Act was unconstitutional. And no government before complied. There was an Irvin McQueen case in 1998, there was a Herman and Armstrong case in 2010, and then there was this case brought by the unions, now representing all workers, not just two individuals, all workers, and the court again confirmed that the Pensions Disqualification Act was unconstitutional, and that what applied was the Pensions Act 1958. And so if you are a confirmed or appointed public servant, you have a permanent position appointed by the Public Service Commission, your pension is secured in accordance with Section 92 of the Constitution, and the law that applies to you is the Pension Act, the current Pension Act. So when you retire, that is the pension you would be entitled to, unless you elect to come under the new scheme. But you would have to personally choose that. But you would automatically be entitled to the existing pension when you retire. And that existing pension is non-contributory, meaning the worker pays nothing towards it, and when you retire, the government pays everything. And it represents about 2/3 of your last salary. A pension on retirement would be about 2/3 of your last salary. So government has to find this money that workers do not contribute to pay pension. That's the law now. No, this law is 1958. And it was brought into force at a time when the public service was less than 500 people. And so government felt at the time that it could meet all of the contributions towards pension. We are now at just under 8,000 people in the public service. So think about it. We have a pension scheme that was designed for public service, less than 500 people. We now have a public service just under 8,000. And we have to find a way to ensure that none of these workers retire into poverty by not having a pension. In the case of 3,400 thereabouts, the existing pension scheme applies because they are confirmed in their positions by the Public Service Commission. And the Constitution says we can't interfere with their pension scheme. That's what the three rulings of the court said, ending with Justice Glasgow's. So we acknowledge that. We restored payment of pension as ordered by the court in November 2022. Remember, the ruling came down in either May or March 2022, and we restored pension in November 2022, very shortly after taking office. Now we have to treat with the remaining almost 4,000 public workers. In fact, the amount of persons to whom the existing pension scheme applies is less than those who it doesn't apply. So the disadvantage there is glaring. But as we have repeatedly said, it is not sustainable for government to contribute 100% to pension for this amount of people. Over time, it will keep growing and growing and changing, right? Because in the service now, we have about 8,000 in total, including those who are appointed by the PSC and those who are not appointed by the PSC. So we have to engage in pension reform. It's unavoidable. In fact, the previous administration said that they were not paying pension without pension reform. In fact, they took a hard line approach. They said nobody getting pension. Those who entitled, not getting. Those who not entitled, not getting until we have pension reform. Because they said it was unsustainable, financially unsustainable. Well, we didn't take that approach. We figure those people who are entitled must get their money, get their pension, because even government is not above the law. The position taken by the previous administration was illegal, it was unconstitutional, it was immoral, and it lacked empathy and understanding and consideration for workers. That's the reality. Because they were paying none. So who were entitled wasn't getting, so everybody was retired into poverty. We are solution oriented. So our position is, okay, let's restore pension for those who are constitutionally entitled, because we can't get around that. No point going to the court a fourth time for the court to rule the same way again. So let us comply with the law as we should, because the government is not above the law, and pay those who are entitled and find a solution so that those who are not entitled to the current scheme will also get pension. So the new Pension Act aims to introduce, for those persons to whom it will apply, and that is not everybody, a new system under which both parties, both employer and employee, will contribute. So it's a contributory pension scheme. And it will apply to all persons, whether you are on contract or whatever form of your contract, right? And it will apply to all new persons coming into the service after the law comes into force. So after the new Pension Act comes into force, if you're appointed by the Public Service Commission, if you're appointed by contract, if you are employed under a contract or any other manner, and you are part of the pension scheme, that new scheme will apply to you. And I want to clarify something here. There is no law in Grenada that says that once you are appointed by the Public Service Commission, whether now or in future, the existing Pension Act will apply to you. I want to repeat that. There is no law in Grenada that says once you are appointed by the Public Service Commission, whether in future or otherwise, the existing law will apply to you. If you are appointed by the Public Service Commission today, the existing law will apply. Once you're appointed by the PSC before the new pension law comes into force, the existing law will apply. If you are appointed by the PSC after the existing law comes into force, after the new law comes into force, that law will apply to you. So I just want to, because I think there might be some confusion there, because the Constitution says Parliament may make laws to amend the pension legislation once it is not less favorable, once the amendment is not less favorable to those entitled. So it is only those entitled, already entitled to a pension, who will be concerned with whether a new legislation is favorable, less favorable or not. we are not interfering with the law as it applies to the people who will already benefit under the existing pension scheme. We are only bringing a new law into force for persons who will, after that law comes into force, be appointed by the Public Service Commission or employed on contract or otherwise by the government. I hope that is clear.
All right.
And go ahead. Yeah.
No, I was just listening to your clarification because sometimes individuals get confused, feeling that if that new pension plans comes into effect, you're saying that they would not the folks who were in the 1958 pension plan, they would not be affected. Only the new they would not be affected. Only the folks who are now coming into being appointed and so forth, they will be part of the new plan. How does the plan affect on folks who are non-public workers? Would that plan be of course associated to them, workers who are non-public workers?
So the intention is, and that's a very good question. The intention is, I'm trying to pull up the bill here. The intention is to include statutory bodies and parastatal. So hopefully, eventually statutory bodies will come under the scheme. As employers, they will contribute their 3% and the worker will contribute their 3%. So we've designed the new pension scheme.
But as you mentioned, just not wanting to cut you, Senator Joseph, but you said, would it be mandatory that of course the statutory bodies and so forth be part of that pension plan? Would that be of course mandatory?
Once you are in terms of statutory bodies, it is not immediately mandatory. Let me just hold on. I'm just trying to pull up the act here, so that I can confirm that. Public sector.
All right, because we also drew for time. So let's.
You drew for a break, right?
Well, we could take a break, but we also drew for time. There's just approximately 10 more minutes left on the program, which I have 5, and of course my phones are going also, which means there are listeners and viewers may want to ask you a question. But I would like to. I would forego the break for now if you are able to pull up that bit of information you wanted to share, so that we could of course pass it on to the listener and viewing public, and then we could entertain those calls from our listeners and viewers who may want to ask you a question or two before we wrap today's program. Were you able to pull that up?
Yeah. So yes. So you want to go ahead, or you?
Yeah, you can go ahead. Go ahead and share that information you wanted to pass on in terms of the act, in terms of the last question that I asked.
Right. So the intention is so it will be mandatory for all public workers.
Okay.
Once it comes into force, it will be mandatory because it will be the pension scheme for all new public workers and all public workers appointed by the Public Service Commission after the act comes into force.
Okay, great.
So the answer to the question is yes, it will be mandatory.
All right, great. We do have our first caller. Let's entertain our first caller. Caller, good morning, and you're live. Caller, good morning. I guess this caller, of course, is not ready for us. Whatever device you have working in the background, please have that taken care of before you come on. Let's go to the WhatsApp. WhatsApp caller, good morning, and I beg of you to be brief, please, with your questions. Go right ahead, please.
Okay, good morning, GT. Season greetings to the Senator and AG.
Morning.
Okay, my question to see that next month, right, we're going to have a new president in the United States, right, who do not believe in climate change. So I would like to know, seeing that the Biden administration who believe in climate change, and I think Kamala had met with small island countries and compensation and whatever, how would it affect Grenada per se? And I know you said that you went to the ICC, so I want to know that if they have to compensate like small islands, like if it's going to be like a combination or Grenada will be separate. And also I need a follow-up with the phone bill with Sheldon Scott. And one of the quickest questions I want to ask you now with Peter David. I know you went up against
Caller,
Peter
I beg of you to be brief. I may have to ask you to stop now, caller, because we drew for time. Senator, you could answer the first question as we move on.
Right. Well, the change in administration in the U.S. We don't know what the official position. We heard the President-elect Trump made certain pronouncements on the campaign trail. We haven't heard a policy yet, a formal policy, but likely, if there are any impacts on Grenada, it would not be Grenada alone. It will be Grenada as part of the grouping called SIDS, Small Island Developing States, because we all have a common cause. All members of SIDS have a common cause that we are dealing with. So it is not likely that there will be any position that would apply to Grenada to the exclusion of other states in similar position as Grenada.
Okay, we do have another caller.
So we have to wait and see what the official position of the incoming Trump.
All right, 435-2041, 435. We do have another caller. Caller, you're live. Good morning. Caller, good morning, and you're live. Caller, good morning, you're live. Caller, good morning, you're live. If you're there, I guess for some reason we're not hearing.
Good morning.
Good morning, you're live. Go right ahead, please.
Sir. Good morning, and good morning to your guests. My first is a comment. The caller said Trump don't believe in climate change. I could also say Grenada don't really believe in climate change. They're doing it for the money, because you have a company that in Glen, burning fossil fluid whole day, whole night. We have abundance of sun on Friday. And then we go to a climate change conference asking for money to save our environment. Are we contributing to that same problem? The second is a question. Who's going to manage that new pension scheme? Is it somebody from the outside or the government of Grenada?
Thank you, caller. Thank you. I hope you were able to hear the caller questions.
Unfortunately, not at all.
I am not sure. I'm not sure what happened. What was taking place there?
Maybe if you can paraphrase for me.
He was asking.
Answer, but I couldn't hear.
Let me see if I could get it. I was trying to listen also. Somehow it was kind of a bit breaking up in my ear also for some reason. I'm not sure what was happening there. He was asking in terms of the pension plan. His second question, if I could try to get it, all of what he was mentioning there. He did mention, of course, who will be managing that particular pension plan. If it's government or an external source. I think that's for the.
That's a very good question. Yeah, that's a very good question. So under the law, there will be established a board of trustees. So a fund. So think similar to NIS, for example.
Yes.
So there will be a fund set up, and there will be a board of trustees, and that board must set up the fund itself into which the contributions will be paid. And the board, let me tell you how the board will be comprised, because we would have different interests represented on the board. So let me just scroll to tell. So the board will comprise an attorney at law who has been practicing at the bar for at least 10 years, an actuary or a person with actuarial qualifications, one person who has demonstrated knowledge and experience in finance, one person who has at least 5 years experience in human resource management, one person who has demonstrated knowledge and experience in investment, one person after consultation with the trade union representing public sector employees, and one person after consultation with statutory bodies. As I indicated, the intention is to have statutory bodies fall under the legislation as well. And of course, the board will also comprise a permanent secretary with responsibility for public administration or his designate, and the permanent secretary with responsibility for finance or his designate. And the board will be a body corporate, and by that I mean it will be a body that can carry out transactions, enter into contract, sue and be sued in its own name, act independently in its own name, similarly as does, say, for example, NAWASA or the NIS or the Port Authority. That level of independence in terms of how it operates, and so the board will have that status, and they will be responsible for administration and management of the pension fund.
Okay, we do have another caller, maybe your final caller for the morning. Caller, you're live. Good morning.
President, good morning. 2 questions. Has the pension age been increased? 1. 2.
Oh gosh, I can't hear you.
Pensioners due for increment at the end of every year because cost of living goes up for the pensioner too. Thank you.
All right. The caller was actually asking if the pension age has been increased, and of course he also wants to know if the amount of pension that will be of course awarded, if it will also increase. I think that's the 2 questions the caller was asking, and I hope I'm correct about it.
So the retirement age for public officers is 60.
Yes.
Right? And secondly, the second question
he was asking into whether would there be an increase in the amount of pension an individual will be receiving, and something along those lines. I hope I'm correct.
No, right. So the payment will depend on the contributions that the worker makes into the fund. And in fact, to my mind, this is one of the respects in which this new pension scheme will actually be advantageous over the existing one, because under the existing pension scheme, you have to reach retirement age to qualify, which is 60 years, yes. Or you must do 26 2/3 in the public service. That's a general age and time frame within which you would qualify for pension. There are other permutations where you can make early retirement, right? So you can do 50 years and 20 turning 50 years and 20 years of service. But in that instance, you will get a reduced pension. That's the current situation. So you have to work a long time. So the minimum, 20 years, and you're turning 50. You could take early retirement and you get your reduced pension. Then at 55, either you or the government can decide to end the relationship and you would qualify for pension. Again, that would be slightly reduced. To get your full pension on the current system, you have to work 26 2/3 years or attain the age of 60. In this proposed new pension scheme, you contribute 3%, the employer contribute 3%. And the pension you attract will depend on how long you stay in the employ of the government or the statutory body. So, for example, if you are employed for less than 2 years, you would be eligible for pension. If you were employed for at least 2 years, but less than 3 years, you would be eligible for 25% of the contribution that you made, or the contribution attributed to you, both you and government. So think about it. Currently, you have to work at least 20 years and attain the age of 50 to get a reduced pension. Under the new scheme, at least 2 years. So once you make 2 years, but less than 3, 25% of the contributions. At least 3 years, but less than 4 years, 50%. So half of what you put in, you will get if you're exiting. At least 4 years, but less than 5 years, 75%. And anything over 5 years, you get 100% of the contribution attributed to you. And that will be the 3% you put, the 3% government put. So in fact, to get your full contribution, all you have to do is to work 5 years or more.
All right, interesting. Senator Joseph, of course.
What you get is your 3% plus the 3% government puts. So you're hardly, on the new scheme, you are hardly going to exit the service without anything.
Okay. Senator Joseph, I want to thank you a whole lot for being with us this morning. I'll give you the opportunity if you want to make any closing contributions before we take a wrap for today.
Yes, thank you very much for the opportunity to appear onto the point again, and I look forward to coming back and sharing with the public our programs, our policies, our initiatives as a government, as we continue to do what is right for our people. We continue to work hard to make Grenada a better place than we inherited it. We will do all we can. We will work together with the Ministry of Climate Resilience as a team to tackle the impacts of climate change. And while we do that locally, we will be on the international stage, advocating for our country. And so thank you very much. And looking forward to our public workers enjoying the new pension scheme, which we think has a lot of benefits. I will probably come back in the near future to speak more on the legislation itself and some of what it provides.
All right.
Because I know our time was short this morning.
So true.
So thank you, JT.
Thank you so much. Why you mentioning me as JT?
Caller, I think somebody asked about Mr. Scott and the matter that we have with him. Yes. So Mr. Scott had requested some information from us and some time to respond, and he didn't reply, so we are going to proceed very shortly.
Okay. Once again, thank you very much, Senator Joseph. Have yourself a great day, and it's GT and not GT. You remember that, right?
GT, no, I'm saying G. Is it something like J?
You would say J. Anyway, this is what
it's GT.
You know me, it's GT. All right. Have a good morning and all the best. Have a good one.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
All right. Hey, folks, that's what we take a wrap for today's edition of To The Point. Join me again tomorrow for another edition. That's what we say goodbye.